Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to project an image onto a fish, my piranha. And we're going to use a lot of the techniques that we've done in some of the previous movies. So if you feel like you're getting lost in this one, go back and review some of the earlier movies regarding projections and bump mapping and connections in the Hypershade. Otherwise, I'm going to move a little quicker. And let's just jump into this. So if you want to use an image of the fish that you had modeled your fish from, we will create a projection with that image onto our fish. And we will create the projection pointing this way onto the side of our fish, because that is the way that we modeled this fish. So let's come in here and create a Fang material. And we will select the texture, create texture button on the color. And we'll right click on file to create a projection. Come into our file and grab the image of our fish or my fish. And we don't see anything in the viewport, so make sure you go to shading, hardware texturing. This looks awful. So let's go to viewport 2. And that's not working. So let's go to high quality rendering. Okay, and now let's go back to our projection. It looks really wacky right now, but we haven't fit our projection to our object. So let's select Fit to Bounding Box. And now it's starting to look a little bit better, but we're going to need to resize. Because if you look, you can see my fish is kind of over here. And it's not in place. You can come into this high quality rendering and select this option box, and you can increase the resolution of the image in your viewport. So it's set to 256 right now. Let's bring it up to 1024, which is going to set it up to be a lot higher. And let's see if we have problems moving this around. If we do, we can always come back in and adjust the settings a little bit lower, but we're getting a much better look of our image on top of the model. So I'm going to leave it at planar because I just want to have the plane pushing right through my object to the other side. So we'll leave this alone. We'll go to 3D texture, placement, attribute editor, so you can see my values changing as I manipulate this 3D placement node. So let's expand these things. Okay, you can see we're getting a drastic performance hit from increasing this too much. So let's go back up to the renderer, the options, and I'll bring it to 512 and see if that gives us a little more resolution and a little better. Yeah, it's okay. It's a little slow. So what you're going to need to do is just kind of resize this and try to fit it into your fish the best way you can. It may not be perfect, but this is kind of just the quick way, an easier way of getting your fish mapped. We can go into the outliner and select our 3D placement node. And with the move tool, we can move it into place. Okay, this might be pretty good. We can kind of scan around and just see how this is looking. And let's go ahead and do a render. We're in Maya software. Let's get out of that. Okay, here we have the fish, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, there's a little anomalies over here, but for right now, I think this is great. Just know that you can always take this image into Photoshop, and if you see that there's areas like this that the background is coming into your object, the fin right here, you can always, in Photoshop, fix your image with the clone tool to try to give you more of a bleed around the actual fish. So if there are any areas like this that kind of come through, the background comes through onto your object, then after you do the clone tool on there, you'll just have the same kind of color as the fin. It'll look like a continuation of the fin. So let's save this. So this is looking good. We have the color being mapped onto our fish right now. I will show you the next stage is to take this projection and this texture image that we are using for the color and use the same image and projection for the bump map. Before we do that, remember, if you're using a 3D placement node with a projection, you need to parent that to your object. And we do that by middle mouse clicking and dragging it on top of your object. So this way, if we move my fish, then the projection will move along with it. I'm going to come back into the renderer and just drop that color texture resolution down again, just so we can pick up some performance. Okay. We got everything placed now. So let's go into the Hypershade. And let's graph our network. So we have our file of the fish. We have the projection and the 3D texture node that is controlling the projection. And this is our Fong. So if we look at the Fong, you see we have an option for bump mapping. And if we middle mouse click on the projection, we can drag that over onto the bump mapping, and it'll automatically create a bump node for us to use. And the reason why we're doing this is because we set this projection up already, and it works perfect, well, as good as it's going to right now, with the color on our fish. And if we want to use that same texture image as our bump map, instead of having to create a whole new projection and try to get that lined up the same way, why don't we just use this exact same projection already so we can cut the work down? So let's select our Fong, and we're going to middle mouse click on the projection and drag it on top of the bump and let go. And automatically it creates a bump node with the projection going into the bump and then the bump going into our Fong. And if we look at our image, you can see the bump is being applied to our fish. So let's go to our bump node and we'll bring down the bump because it's probably way too severe. And let's do a render. So here we have the fish with the bump and without. So we can bring this up just so we can definitely see what's going on with it. See the kind of effect that you're getting with it. Now, sometimes when you're working with images, you may want to try to invert the bump depth, because sometimes you might have things that are popping out that should be popping in. So let's just invert this to -0.6. And let's do a render. And you can see which one looks like it's working better. Now, when you're working with bumps, you can always bring your color image in to Photoshop, and you can take all the color out of it, turn it into a black and white image, and then you can adjust the levels of the image to accentuate what should be pushing out and what should be pushing in. You can optimize your bump because you know that values are going to push out and dark values are going to push in. So that's a way that you can take your color image and turn it into an optimized bump map. And that is utilizing connections in the Hypershade to be able to use the same projection that we used for color mapping and use that for our bump mapping also.